up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and this is the Rider Dynasty Podcast. Tonight on the RoD Pod, we will be discussing our latest Dynasty Quarterback Rankings. But before we do that, let's see who's joining us tonight. Eric, with Dan Snyder securing his hold on the football team, do you think they now choose an even more racist name? Like, does he double down now that he's in complete control?
Oh, no. Wow. Look, I'm ready for Dan Snyder to just, get forced out by the NFL. Let me dream. Jeff Bezos is going to come in and buy the team. We're going to be the Washington Amazon Primes or something, and I don't know. Just, it's dark enough, man. Let me dream.
I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry. Kyle, with James White returning to New England, will any Patriot running back finish as an RB2 or higher?
Maybe in a 16-team league. No, I take that back. I think if anybody has a chance to, the best one is Damian Harris. But RB2 is probably the ceiling.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there. Also, coming back, I'm shocked considering how much he hassled me about the Jets. Rob Mongole. Rob, Mike Pettin just sold his home in Wisconsin. Does he deserve more credit for fixing that horrible Green Bay defense?
Absolutely not.
Well, go on. Why not?
We have not fixed the holes in the middle of our defense for what feels like a decade now. I feel like we've always been a middle linebacker and defensive tackle away from having an elite defense. I'm still upset about taking Jordan Love over Patrick Queen in the draft last year. I will never forgive the front office for that.
Yeah, I can't argue with you. That's a very good point. I didn't like Mike Pettin when he was with the Jets. He was supposedly the unnamed source that often went to Manish Mehta with dirt on the team. So I am not a fan. However, somebody I am a fan of, I would like to welcome our pal and a fantastic writer, Kit, to the pod.
Thanks, man.
Kit, with the signing of Kenny G, some are speculating we will see the Alan Diggs bump 2.0. Can we expect Daniel Jones to jump up into top 12 territory?
Yes. I totally think so. I mean, we can at least say this. He doesn't have an excuse if he doesn't make it, right? We put all the weapons around him, let us succeed, actually signed even a couple linemen. Hope we go lineman heavy in the draft. I'm a believer. I still remember seeing flashes from his rookie year. Last year was a real tough situation with the line and the weapons. I think we empowered him to do it. He's got to do it.
Time to put up or shut up. But before we get into tonight's topic, do me a favor. Hit subscribe and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at Ride or Dynasty. And check out our website, riderdynasty.com, for all of our latest articles. And actually do all of that, but most importantly, tell a friend about us. That's going to help us continue to put out the content that you need. Now, on to the main topic. We just published over at RiderDynasty.com our latest Dynasty rankings and the final version before the NFL rookie draft at the end of the month. Tonight, we're going to tackle the quarterback rankings. Now, remember, these rankings reflect a perceived 3-year window, which in our opinion is the correct way to value players. So let's dive right in. Tier 1 is one man and one man alone, Pat Mahomes. He was our consensus QB1. Is there anything we need to say about Pat Mahomes?
Not only was he the consensus number one across all of our rankers, he was unanimous number one. I think that speaks all it needs to be said.
All right, that's what I thought. Anyway, our second tier is where it gets a little more interesting. They were grouped pretty tightly right behind Mahomes. Now, we have Josh Allen at 2, Kyler Murray at 3, and finishing out tier 2 is Dak Prescott at 4. Eric, you and I both had doubts about Mr. Allen. Is it safe to say that maybe you're now an Allenholic?
Ooh, I don't know about that. Yeah, I mean, I don't have him quite this high. I don't have him in my top 4. He's my QB 6. So I guess I'm still low on him compared to most people. I think it's one of those things where I'm just slow to adjust on him. I think we saw for 2 years the potential, but he wasn't necessarily a good quarterback. And then last year, obviously, he put it all together and had the weapons and everything. The question is how, can it stick? And I think the other issue is QB6 is not a bad spot to be at this point. There's a lot of really good options. I mean, you mentioned Kyler, you mentioned Dak. There's a few other quarterbacks who I feel like are really good in the top 7 maybe. So I'm way higher on Josh Allen than I was a year ago, but apparently still lower than most.
Yeah, I have him up all the way to number 3, only behind Dak, who I'm a huge fan of Dak coming back this year. Rob, where are you on Dak Prescott?
I have Dak Prescott ranked as my QB3, and I am firmly in the camp of Josh Allen as my QB2. A lot like Eric, I was out on him last year. I thought with Diggs coming in, the rushing floor wouldn't be there, and I was completely proven wrong on that. But
yeah, and I hope you continue to be proved wrong. It was great seeing him play so well. I was very surprised. Now, where are we on Kyler Murray, Kit? I am not super impressed with his play or the coaching. So I'm not as high on him as others are. I have him personally ranked at number 5.
That's really fair, and I have him at 4. I think I would agree with that sentiment, right? I mean, the shine came off the Kingsbury a little bit, especially as the season wore on, and Kyler as he struggled a little bit as a passer. But I think the things that Kyler does really just give him such a great fantasy floor, and he is so young. I don't see the organization going away from him. So it just feels like he offers an incredibly high floor because of his rushing upside and a consistent, sustainable production through 3 years and then maybe even beyond that, right? And so that's really, I would agree with the sentiment overall that he did look like he struggled a little bit, and maybe it's not him and Kingsbury for for the rest of time. But I just think that the other factors balance that out and make him such a valuable piece.
Heading into year 3 with Kyle, is Kingsbury on a hot seat? Does he have to win this year?
I don't know that he's necessarily on a hot seat this year. I think if they don't do well and don't make a playoff run, then we'd be talking about it next year. But this year I don't think is the year where they call it quits on Cliff. I'd like to see what he does in the draft and the pieces they can put around Kyler there and see where they can go from there. But I don't think that this year is the year that his job is going to be in question.
I just don't know quite how long you're going to ride with somebody who doesn't seem to be able to put it together, especially with the talent that they have. And Kyler's on a rookie deal. Not going to be on a rookie deal for long. Well, let's jump right into tier 3 then. Tier 3 is a weird tier for me. We have Justin Herbert at 5, Deshaun Watson at 6, Russell Wilson at 7, and Lamar Jackson at 8. That's a weird bunch. Kyle, who is too low in that tier?
I'm looking at my own rankings just as a reference because off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I feel like Russell Wilson should be a spot or 2 higher, especially with the recent things coming out on Deshaun Watson, which I'm sure we will address. I'm not going to get into the legal side of things because that is not my forte at all. I'll leave that to Rob. But he's kind of like holding a hand grenade and you pulled the pin already right now. We don't know what's going to happen to him moving forward. It hasn't blown up yet. I don't trust the league to handle anything like that well. Goodell doesn't exactly have a great track record, so I feel like he's okay where he's at, but I would bump Russell Wilson ahead of him.
Yeah, Deshaun is definitely a hand grenade. Kit, you and I were talking about Deshaun prior to the pod. I had asked you why you still actually had him ranked as high as you did, but go ahead and tell the riders what you said
so,
to me.
It sounds like a little bit of a cop-out, but I really have him just ranked 2 different ways. In terms of pure dynasty talent, he is, to me, clearly number 3 and maybe even number 2 ahead of Josh Allen. He was in exactly QB5 for 3 straight years, had a terrible team around him and fading weapons with Fuller going out last year and still sustained it. So just based on pure talent and dynasty value, assuming that he's available, I think that I stand by him being my third ranked quarterback. That being said, obviously the allegations that are coming out are snowballing. There's likely to be some disciplinary action from the league. So with that discount, I think it'd be perfectly reasonable to have him in this tier, or even a tier lower, honestly, right? So I don't know if I would go buy him right now. I'd be scared to do that, to acquire him right now. But in the startup draft, I'm probably hands off. That being said, 3 months ago, he might have been like my favorite Dynasty Superflex player, period. So I think, I'm not accounting for the discount, but if I did, I would definitely consider knocking him down.
Now, Rob, we see what's happening. You're down in Houston. What's it like down there? I mean, it's pretty much over for Deshaun, right?
I'm not sure he has a future with the franchise. It's nothing that Houston fans aren't used to. We had a little run with the Rockets there where we couldn't get out of the Western Conference Finals. We had a good run with the Astros, but we're just used to being bummed out about our sports teams down here. It's something we've grown accustomed to.
Now, have there been any rumors about Deshaun? I know locally you sometimes hear things about people that, the national media doesn't quite get, especially in smaller media markets. Like, was there any of this floating around before all of these cases came out?
I think everyone was of the opinion that Deshaun was an extremely high character guy. I know he had a rough childhood growing up. He's had an amazing story from where he started to getting here. And I think these allegations caught the city off guard.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. He is the face of that franchise, even with everything that was going on. Moving off of that topic, Eric, Justin Herbert, is 5 too high?
It's a little high for me. Again, kind of going back to what I was saying about Josh Allen, there's just so many good options. Dak's had the injury, but you've got to feel pretty much 100% confident that, Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott and Pat Mahomes are absolute franchise quarterbacks. And then guys like Josh Allen and Kyler Murray give you a rushing floor that Herbert doesn't have. So to me, I can't put him over those guys, even though I really, really like Herbert.
That's fair. I think the idea would be that, you said Mahomes and then the other guys, but I think the hope would be that, the risk is that he, regresses a little bit and isn't as much of a superstar as he looked like as a rookie. But the upside is literally is like Patrick Mahomes, and then you have like the number one Superflex Dynasty guy. Maybe you're probably Mahomes is still ahead of him, but that's a potential trajectory that I think is like kind of factored in the weighted average for why he ends up at 5 among all our rankings.
Mm-hmm.
I think 5 is perfectly fine for Herbert, and I think he showed in college he could run the ball a bit. He's not the most athletic guy. He's definitely not Lamar Jackson. But I think he can be someone who offers a little floor of, 20, 25 yards a game.
Now, there seemed to be a slight bounce back in rankings for Lamar Jackson, but he's only up at number 8. Are we being criminally low on Lamar Jackson's ranking?
Yes.
He's only 24 years old. He's only 24.
Oh, stat on.
This is going to be his 4th season?
Yeah.
I saw a stat on Twitter today that in terms of points per game, he scored more than any quarterback in 2019 and any, except himself, in his 2020 season, and any in 2018 except Mahomes. So, he still was incredibly efficient and, had offered an awesome floor with that record.
Because technically in our rankings, we have Lamar and Wilson very, very close. Only 0.1 of a point separated them, so they're practically tied. I just wonder why we're putting Wilson above Lamar Jackson.
For me, it's the weapons that Lamar Jackson has. Since Lamar's coming to the league, Baltimore's given him nothing to throw to. I think Baltimore led the league in dropped catchable passes last year. And you give Lamar Jackson a number 1 receiver, a true number one receiver, and he goes up the rankings, and he absolutely has a talent to do so.
So you're not a Miles Boykin believer?
Absolutely not.
Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the number one wide receiver point is really fair. And the guy I always get stuck on with Lamar is I feel like Kyler and Lamar get treated very differently in Dynasty. And I think I've said this before, I don't really see what the difference is, except that in 2019, Lamar was dominant MVP caliber player. And this year it was Kyler, and Lamar took a step back. And I get we want to
Except that Lamar led his team to the playoffs.
Right.
When he had his MVP year.
Right. And if you go and look at like their actual numbers and look at Lamar this year versus Kyler as a rookie, you know, everybody's freaking out about Lamar as a passer. He had 26 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Like, the guy's not this disaster that I think we want to make him out to be. And Kyler is not this sure thing as a passer either. And he has somebody like DeAndre Hopkins. What does Lamar look like with DeAndre Hopkins? And as good of a rusher as Kyler Murray is, he's still not Lamar Jackson. Nobody is. I mean, I think you just have to look at the 2019 season that Lamar Jackson put together and go, that's something that only Lamar Jackson can give you, and it's so, so, so valuable.
Yep. I think it comes down to Lamar Jackson is not a bad passer. He has just had a horrible streak of receivers and pass catchers that have limited his ceiling in the passing game. Obviously, his rushing upside is tremendous and helps bolster his fantasy value, but his passing upside has been limited purely based off of pass catchers.
Exactly that. And adding Sammy Watkins this offseason does nothing for me, and I don't think it does anything for Lamar either.
Man, Rob is really just trying to get JJ and Eric going with that one.
Hold me back. Hold me back.
Oh,
yeah.
no, you're
JJ washed his hands
don't.
of Sammy. I think you're alone on it now.
Yeah,
Eric.
I'm done. So, I didn't even register you saying that. I know that they're kind of. I like Devin Duvernay on that team, and I hope that he gets an opportunity this year to kind of show what he has. But I mean, yeah, they need some serious talent. They have to draft one of the top receivers, right?
I would think so. And I mean, how much would that team have benefited from like a Kenny G or like trading for even like a Mike Williams? Just a guy like that when everything's going wrong, just chuck a 50-50 ball and he'll come down with it more than 50% of the time. Like, I feel like that would be such a great extra dimension for that offense and bailout for Lamar. So hopefully someone like Terrace Marshall, I know we were talking pre-recording, get some fans of him. He seems like a pretty prototypical size that might work for that exposition.
Don't wish that on me. Don't wish that on me.
So now let's talk about the value of players. Looking at this third tier, we have Justin Herbert at 5. How much would you have to add onto Justin Herbert in order to get, say, Kyler Murray, somebody who we have ranked only 2 spots ahead?
That's a good question. With some people, that one's definitely going to depend on their valuation of a younger QB. Because, you know, in Dynasty, there's a lot of people that overvalue youth. And so I think there's probably people in the world that would do that straight up. The ones that value youth over experience. Both of them still on rookie deals, as you mentioned earlier. For me, I would probably want like a this year's second or a future first, maybe. I don't know. That's a tough one. I guess it really just depends on your situation and your trade partner, what they're looking for.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up anything on top of Herbert to get Murray, but I would trade Murray for Herbert plus like a second. Like, I basically like view them as pretty much equal, and so if I could get, like you said, a second, right, like the 14th pick or something to move from one to the other, I would do that. But I don't think I'd give up the 14th pick to do that because I kind of view them as pretty likely to be a wash over the next 3 to 5 years.
I could see myself giving up a late second, but no more than that. But I also have them ranked back to back. It's not a large tier break between the two of them, between 4 and 5 for me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. What about going from Lamar Jackson up to Dak Prescott?
Down to Dak Prescott?
Whoa.
Anybody?
Go ahead, Eric.
I mean,
I'll hear you.
I've got Lamar a spot up on him, so I'm the wrong person to ask. But I kind of agree that a lot of these guys, with the exception of Watson that we've talked about so far, and Mahomes being a tier above, this whole Allen, Murray, Prescott, Herbert, Wilson, Lamar tier to me is, I have them roughly even. So if you give me something with real value on top of it for any of them, I'm happy to shuffle around.
Yep. The difference between...
Well, that's the idea with a tier, though, right? Like, that's why they're in the same tier.
Yep.
It shouldn't take a lot to move around.
The difference between
Yeah,
the two
I
is
agree.
not going to be enough that I would trade one for one just for... I mean, that's trading just to be trading, which I'm probably guilty of in the past. But if I get somebody, like you said, Eric, if they're willing to throw in, a wide receiver 2 or a RB2 option that I can throw in the flex and be really excited about, then I'll take that all day.
All right, now our next tier was an odd collection, and it wasn't far enough below tier 3 to really be a separate tier because they don't quite fit in with tier 4. Let me show you and we can discuss it. So in this next group, we have Aaron Rodgers and Joe Burrow. You can't have two polar opposite, like age-wise, career-wise players, right? One's just starting, one's finishing an MVP season. Which way should Aaron Rodgers go? Should he go up with Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Deshaun, and Russell? Or should he go down to the next tier? Kyle?
Gosh, that's a tough question for me. I feel like up, just because Rodgers is somebody that I would like to start on my team alongside one of those guys. If I had to choose between Rodgers or one of those guys on game day on the last second lineup decision, it would totally come down to matchup. I wouldn't look at Rodgers and be like, I don't like him as much. Like him and Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones coming back, like I have zero concerns for Aaron Rodgers moving forward. Now, if he falls off a cliff this year, oh well. Nobody's predicting that after the season he had last year.
Yeah, and I'm right there. Like you said at the beginning of the intro, right? 3 years is a good way to think about it. I know the situation with the Packers is a little tenuous. I tend to think that while it was very, I know we have a Packers fan who probably has their own opinion, but I tend to think while it was very foolish for them to go with Love and Dillon 1-2 last year, I think it would be more foolish to say, oh, that means we need to get rid of Aaron Rodgers in a year. Like, no, if once you get the new evidence that Aaron Rodgers is still playing an MVP level, you go all in on that and try to win a championship. So I expect him to be a top 5 QB for at least 2-3 years. If he did go to another team, I would expect him to perform. He's in that all-time great status that I could see him playing into the early 40s like Brady. So, I think he belongs up. I had to make a selection.
Now, see, Kit, I'm 100% in your corner. I watched Aaron Rodgers play last year, and I didn't see anything that told me that Aaron Rodgers only has 2 years left or a year left. I mean, obviously, he won the MVP. So he could make all the throws. He was still moving well in the pocket, still scrambling well. I personally have him ranked as my QB4 because I don't see him finishing outside of the top 5 for the next 3 years. So I'm confused as why everybody else has him so low.
As a Packers fan and someone who has Rodgers a little bit lower, happy to chime in here. He's 37 years old, which is not that old for a quarterback, but he's made some comments in the past which suggest he's not going to stick around as long as a Breeze or a Brady. He's got other plans in life. I mean, shoot, he might go host Jeopardy at this point. I think you also have to account for some organizational concerns. Why they took Jordan Love in the first last year. I don't think that's a big deal, but I think the larger deal is that they didn't restructure his contract this offseason. They could have freed up about $5 million in cap and been all in, gone for the championship again this year, dealt with cap consequences later, and they didn't. And that's a big red flag to me. It makes it easier for the organization to move on after 2021. Maybe there's a little more tensions with Matt LaFleur back there than what the public really knows is going on.
I would still take 1 year on the Packers and 2 years of crazy free agency Brett Favre in the Vikings from him.
Absolutely.
But that makes sense that he might not be on the Packers. Eric, you and I are usually pretty simpatico on these players. You have him down at 9. Why?
Yeah, I do.
Tell me why you're wrong.
Well, I mean, I'll admit, listening to this, I think I'd bump him up a spot. I think I'd put him over Burrow. I think that's where I'd stop things. I mean, yeah, when you talk about a 3-year window, I mean, Rodgers is still as good as it gets, right? But to Rob's point, you know, at 37, what's his kind of residual value at the end of that 3-year window? What are you going to be holding on to? You know, Brady's still putting up quality numbers, even if he's not Rodgers, but, you know, how far down in the ranks is he? Just because you're kind of on a year-by-year basis at that point. So, yeah, I mean, Rodgers is great, but with so many younger options, I feel like you don't have to... You're not sacrificing, you know, points per game by going with Dak. But he just happens to be younger.
Kit, what about Joe Burrow? What about the younger of these two? Where does he belong?
I think he's pretty perfectly where he is. And since he started this, I've been back and forth on who would I want from Burrow or Rodgers. And I think in a startup draft, I would almost assuredly take Burrow. But there are many team constructions where I prefer to have Rodgers. I mean, if I think I have a chance in the next 2 or 3 years, a good chance, like I'm close to the favorite or runner-up, I prefer Rodgers. But I think he's right where he belongs, right? I mean, I think if you look at the next tier, we're looking at guys like Stafford and Tannehill, who are probably, you know, they're very good and will be very serviceable for a number of years, but are older, right? It might have a little more question marks looming. And if you look above, you're looking at guys who have kind of elite rushing upside, have already done it. And so I think he's kind of pretty perfectly placed there, you know, right in the same Aaron Rodgers bracket. So kind of an interesting response, but we think we did a good job.
That's fair. Joe Burrow, Kyle.
Yes.
Where are you moving him? Down with Stafford and Tannehill or up to Lamar and Watson or Herbert?
I think I would probably take him over Watson if I was in a startup right now, because that, you know, as we discussed before, without those concerns, of course I wouldn't do that. I personally have him ranked 1 spot below Herbert, but I do have him a couple above Stafford and a few above Tannehill. So I think he belongs, I hate to, you know, have the nearly the same response, but I think he belongs where he is. His injury is not one that I'm too terribly concerned about moving forward, because it was a contact injury. It wasn't like he was just running in the open and just blew his knee out. Like, he got hit in the legs, crumbled weird. It happens. It's football. That's not an injury where I'm like, ooh, that's a guy that's probably going to have a future of injury concern with that. He's not the kind of player that does a lot of things that concern me for re-injury in the future. And if you ask me after the draft, if they end up taking an offensive lineman, which everybody and their mama prays they do in the first round, then I'd probably move him up a tier.
Well, now that we finished talking about the QB1 from 2020, let's just do a quick sneak peek. We didn't include rookies in these rankings. Lawrence is the presumed QB1. Where does Lawrence fall into these rankings? Are we moving him above Burrow and Rodgers? Are we putting him up in that 3rd tier? Eric?
I don't think I'd put him above them. I think he's right around where Burrow is. I absolutely loved Burrow as a prospect. I think he was the best prospect since Luck. But Lawrence is on that level too. Burrow's a little older, but had a mostly promising rookie season. So I think they're really close at this point. For me, I think Burrow and Lawrence maybe drop down a tier below Rodgers, but Lawrence is definitely right there.
For me, it's wild to think about watching Trevor Lawrence over the past 3 years in college. We only got 1 year of Joe Burrow in college, and Burrow is still older. I know he went a year ahead of him, but it's just weird to think about the length of time that we've seen each one excel. So to answer that question, as far as Rodgers, Burrow, I would probably put Lawrence right in the middle of them. If I was in a startup right now, I would probably take T-Law between those two.
And I would say I'd put him in at the top of the tier below, just because even sure thing that everyone can always be. Like, you haven't done done it at the NFL level. You haven't yet at all. There's just an added discount that I apply there, right? And I think Burrow acquitted himself nicely. It's like, okay, you got it. You're an NFL starting quarterback. You're a franchise level quarterback. It appears. 2 games in, I'd probably maybe even put him ahead of Rodgers and Burrow if he does what everyone says. But right now, it's just the uncertainty. I have to discount it a little bit, put him closer to that Stafford Tannehill, even though I'd pick him over this team.
Like a GM signing a player to approve it deal. I like it.
I'm about right there between the two as well. I think I would have Burrow slightly ahead of Trevor Lawrence, but I think they're relatively interchangeable. It's like we were talking about trading from a tier 2 quarterback to a tier 3 and vice versa. If I had the 101, I don't know if I would trade it for Joe Burrow, and I also don't know if I would trade Joe Burrow for Trevor Lawrence straight up right now. I think I want to see what he's doing for a couple of weeks, see if he's really gonna make that leap. Lawrence definitely has a bigger upside, but you're definitely taking on a lot more risk. Burrow's already shown he can do it at the NFL level at this point.
So now we'll look at the Jets QB. Where does Fields fall into these rankings?
Ooh, spicy.
Thank you.
With the Jets, he would go probably after our tier 4, which is Stafford, Tua, Tannehill. Not a dig on the Jets, just honestly where I'd probably start him now unless they sign some better weapons.
I think I'd put him on the top of that tier. I can't put Tua over Wilson, Fields. Any QB this year who goes top 5 is going to be instant over Tua for me.
I'm right there with you, and actually even looking at this, Tua was the one that stood out to me. I could make the argument that, Tua's not upside, but a happy path for Tua would be turning into Baker Mayfield. He's 6 spots lower than him. And there's a chance, my confidence was shooken up in him last year that, there's a chance he's more like Daniel Jones. I don't know. So for me, Tua is almost the one that doesn't belong, and I would concur that I want to would want to move him. Slot all the rookies except maybe Mac Jones, who I'm still a little skeptical about above.
Well, listen, just because we're saying the rookies, we don't have to include all the QBs, right? I'm not putting Kellen Mond up here, right? I don't necessarily put Mac Jones at that same level as the other 4. I know supposedly the 49ers do, but I do not. Tier 4. We have Matthew Stafford, formerly of Lions. We have Tua, who I just invested in an auction draft, tidy sum of money in, and Ryan Tannehill. What a weird mix. We have 2 older quarterbacks and 1 young gun. Eric, you said you're not that high on Tua. I am. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think his range of outcomes is just shifted down. It wasn't a good rookie year, and it wasn't a disaster. Don't get me wrong; he didn't go Dwayne Haskins on us. But if the Dolphins are any team, they're going to draft you with a top 5 pick. You should be better than a below average starting quarterback. And I think, especially in this day and age, we probably don't react to that strongly enough. That the norm is that you come in and show something. I'm not writing the guy off, but the odds that he is a top 10 quarterback or ever on that Herbert level are very small to me. I think you're kind of hoping, I agree. It's good scenario is he pulls a Baker Mayfield, and that feels kind of underwhelming to me.
Based off of what we've seen, I totally understand where you're coming from. But if I had to think up worst case scenario for a quarterback to come into, it's coming off of a horrific injury, not having a preseason, getting thrust into a starting role in the middle of a season where a team was already gelling pretty well without you, and then flip-flopping back and forth between starting bench. And sure, there's an argument for he didn't really play well enough to earn that starting job, but what chance did he have to get ready to start in the NFL?
But I mean,
after seeing him this year, to see what he can do this year, then I would be willing to, say like, okay, at best he'll be Baker Mayfield or one of those middling quarterbacks. But I'm not quite ready to give up on him yet. I'm not trying to get him on all of my squads, but I want to see what he can do this year.
I think Baker is a great comp for Tua, and I think we need to certainly address the injury concerns. I mean, he came off a substantial hip injury and didn't get a full offseason. I'm just so confused about why they used Fitzmagic to close games last year. I mean, the guy obviously led Alabama to a national championship. I mean, a great overtime game against Georgia, unfortunately. Or was that against Georgia? I might be pulling it.
Shut up. Yes, it was.
I mean, he's done it on the national championship stage. He can come in and close games, but it's extremely concerning to me that the Dolphins felt the need to pull him and put in Fitzpatrick. I think I've got Tua in the tier below this. I'm not really buying the dip, but I certainly think he can skyrocket up the rankings given a breakout year 2.
What pick would you guys be willing to accept in the Superflex rookie draft for Tua? You have Tua, someone wants him.
I have Tua, and somebody wants him.
Yeah.
Maybe 1-1 or 1-2? Maybe?
Yeah, I would probably need one of the top 3-ish picks to guarantee that I'm going to get one of the top quarterbacks, because it's likely if I have Tua on my roster and it wasn't in a startup, I probably spent one of the top 3 picks on him in a super
I'm very negative, I guess. I 1-7, 1-8.
I'm right there.
I'm with you.
1-6.
Maybe lower.
You're ready to throw out the chute.
I'm ready
You're
to
done.
take
I would
Trey
not
Lance
pay more.
over him. Like at
Yeah,
that
I mean,
point,
that's the thing is
beginning of
there's
one of the
5.
picks. Hey, reset button. Get another guy who maybe will flash right away. I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's 5. I'm not a big
I
Mac
just
Jones
can't
fan,
believe the
but
lack of
there's 5 quarterbacks.
any semblance of patience. Like half of a rookie year, and people are
I'm
done.
not done. I think that I forget who made the point, but the standard now is like you're not going to get a long leash. It's not like, oh, we sit you for a while, we play out your whole rookie contract, and we see. It's like if he struggles through 6 starts this year, he could be on a trajectory to be Josh Rosen right away. Like it could happen that quick. And I understand there's the other side where he takes off, but the way the NFL is treating quarterbacks right now, the Dolphins have the draft capital to just be like, okay, try someone else next year.
That's a good point. Eric, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but with saying like you'd give up a 1 or take a 1-7 for him, are you essentially saying like you'd be willing to take a flyer on one of the non-top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in place of Tua rather than waiting out and seeing what he could do?
Yeah, I would take any of the top 5. I'm not a big Mac Jones guy. I mean, if Mac Jones goes like pick 20, maybe not, but assuming those 5 guys go in the top 10, like I think they will, I'd take a top 10 guy from this year over a top 10 guy from last year who had a pretty meh year. And then, I mean, you've got Chase and Pitts and Harris, who I think are all studs. So
at 107,
me,
it doesn't necessarily have to be a quarterback that you replace him with.
So in a super flex league, are you taking Devonta Smith before Tua?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's probably where I draw. That's probably the spot where I draw the line.
I'm at about 108 like Eric is. I would take every quarterback except Mac Jones in front of him. If Mac Jones somehow ends up in San Francisco, I'm taking Mac Jones ahead of him. But I will take all 4 of the quarterbacks, maybe Mac Jones as well, plus Javonte Williams, ETN, Najee Harris, Kyle Pitts. So
Jamar Chase.
I would take him over any of the receivers, but I will pull the trigger on a running back or Kyle Pitts.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's tier 4. I know we didn't talk a lot about Tannehill. I don't see him going much above this.
I actually have Tannehill a tier above this. I think Tannehill is criminally low here at 13.
Okay, go ahead. Why?
I know he's in his 30s already, but he has done nothing but prove it since he has been the starting quarterback of the Titans. 2 seasons ago, when he first became the starter, he basically matched Patrick Mahomes in points per game. last year he was not too far off with A.J. Brown playing injured all year. I think the biggest concern is that he's already in his 30s. He's only done it for 2 years, and his coaching staff has just been completely wiped clean. 2 years ago, a lot of the offensive side of the football moved to Green Bay. This year, the rest of it's moved to Atlanta. They're absolutely starting from square one. He might be learning a new system at this point. That is the only reason that I wouldn't have him all the way up is up in the tiebreakers with like an Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, or maybe even higher.
I can see how learning a new system would be a knock on a player, but if anybody learning a new system stood something to gain, Ryan Tannehill would probably get more passing attempts, which should ideally bolster his value some. If there is indeed a new system, of course.
Or more passing
Right.
attempts to come to him.
At the very least, yeah.
I think we have Tannehill at a pretty good spot based upon his age and his performance. I think being a QB1, he belongs as a QB1 or right on that borderline. I don't know how much higher, though. I can't move him above Rodgers.
No.
I wouldn't move him above Rodgers, but frankly, I'd have him almost square with Burrow and in that same group.
Fair enough.
Would you?
Fair enough. Let's look at Tier 5. Tier 5 is a much larger tier. In Tier 5, we have Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Daniel Jones. There you go, Kit. Baker Mayfield. Sorry to everybody. And then tied, if you can believe this, Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz.
Jalen Hurts has got to be the
I'm
most
shocked.
polarizing. I mean, I obsessively do mock drafts, and like it feels like those Superflex mocks. Sometimes I saw the end of the second or the early
Wow.
third, and then some people are like, "That's insane. I wouldn't take it to the seventh." I'm closer to the latter, honestly, because I'm just not convinced he can sustain as a starter long term with his passing ability. But you know, the counter argument's always, well, in like 4 games, he rushed for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, he's going to offer fantasy production as long as he's starting, which is definitely hard to argue.
For me, the tiebreaker there, I give it to Jalen Hurts. And the only reason is because as a dynasty manager, sometimes you got to look at a player as a trade asset. I had Hurts in 2 leagues going into the offseason, and I traded him in both of them, and I got Calvin Ridley in a package, and I got D-Hop in a package, which significantly improved my roster in both of them. So I think he's more valuable from a fantasy perspective than Carson Wentz right now because of his tremendous trade value. Because there's people, like you said, it's polarizing. There's people that value him incredibly highly, and you can get a lot for him. Whereas Wentz,
Right now,
he's kind of a roll of the dice at this point. We don't know. Obviously, he's teaming back up with Frank Reich. He's got upside. He's in a new offense, yada, yada. But there's probably not a lot of folks that are going to be like willing to pay up like they would for Hurts.
So I look at this group, and I really see it as 2 tiers almost. I see Ryan, Cousin, and Hurts, and everyone else. And I think with Hurts this season, you're guaranteed a 1-year rental. He's a great buy if you were all in pushing for a championship. I think he puts up a top 6 QB season. The concern is, what if he's not the QB next year? Philadelphia is likely to have 3 first-round draft picks. He's easily replaceable if that's the case, and he does not put up great passing numbers. But the rushing upside is incredible. And I mean, I'm all in. If I think I'm a contender this year, I will pay up for Hurts and take the risk for the 1-season wonder.
I think when you look at the rankings, though, being that these are dynasty rankings, you have to look at his long-term viability in the position. I mean, if you get 1 top 6 year and then nothing else.
Oh, yeah. I would have him ranked about 16. I think he still belongs in this tier. But that 1 year that you are guaranteed to get out of him is going to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would take somebody over a 3-year span if I knew I was going to get at least 1 top 7 year and then get 2 top 15 to 17 years out of him. Like, that's somebody you
But
can...
we don't know that. We don't know
Right.
if he's getting a second year.
But, I mean, we have him ranked as, what, QB 20?
20.
I don't think he would end up being that low. Over the span of the next 3 years, I don't think he'll end up being that low.
The issue is, I mean, he could be a QB1 this year in fantasy. It doesn't mean he's a good NFL quarterback.
But
True.
we're not building real NFL teams. We're building fantasy rosters.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
It does remind me a
Not
little
trying
bit
to
of the Josh
discredit what
Allen.
you're saying.
It reminds me a little bit of the Josh Allen argument. And I mean, I'm probably going to take the same side of it. I'm not that high on Hurts at this point. But I remember we said the same things about Josh Allen is, oh, well, he's got the rushing upside short term. That's great. But long term, I don't think he's going to be the quarterback, 3-4 years from now. And of course, look at where he is now. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Hurts.
But what are the differences?
I think Allen's obviously got
Draft capital.
Yeah. Allen's got the better arm. He's got the draft capital. I don't disagree.
So there's some major differences between the two.
I also think,
as far as their situation to be given more time.
yes, and I also think Allen's an outlier in that he developed in that way. I mean, we can't expect quarterbacks to develop like Allen did.
Well, and the
So,
Bills
I mean,
added a great wide receiver to their roster as well, which the Eagles clearly need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Eagles have no wide receivers and no offensive line. He's got nothing to work with there.
They have Miles Sanders.
I do think, though, a year ago, if you really remember, I was on board of being hands-off on Allen for similar. I get the argument. For similar reasons, I'm hands-off on Hurts now, where it's like, for Dynasty, I just don't know if he can be a starting quarterback. And, then once he does figure that out, which admittedly is an outlier scenario, it's like, oh, shit, now we have the rushing, and we all of a sudden have a competent passer who's going to be around for years. The upside is there, even if it is rare that players develop with.
Kyle, why aren't you respecting Baker Mayfield enough?
I just don't see him as high of a QB as everybody else does. As looking across our rankings across the board, I don't feel like I'm that low on him. You're actually lower than me. So you tell me.
Yeah, but I'm the host, so I can say things like that.
No, I don't love him. I haven't from the beginning. He's never been a better than a middling QB. He's like an average of QB 17 on his career. And of the players I can get in that range, I feel like there's players with a lot better upside than Mayfield.
I couldn't agree more.
Why, thank you. You smart man.
We're all laughing because you cut out, so I don't even know what you said.
Oh, you're going to love it.
I hope so. All right. Well, we didn't talk at all about, Kirk Cousins.
I was going to say,
Or Daniel Jones.
even as a Giants fan, Kirk Cousins is my guy in this tier. I mean, he's not exciting. He doesn't really have upside. But if you're talking about a QB2 in Superflex, you can get him pretty cheap, cheaper than the value he provides. Again, 3-year window. I think he's QB 12 to 15 for the next 3 years, maybe even a little better with JJ really, blossoming. I know they don't want to throw. I know the limitations he has, but I've loved having him on my teams and easier than I would expect to acquire.
He's a low-end quarterback one every year.
Yeah.
He's always underrated in Dynasty. I made a push for the championship last year, and I traded Hollywood Brown for him, and I would do it again in a second.
Beautiful.
He's a great QB2 or QB3 in Dynasty.
I like quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins in Superflex. As long as they can hold their position and not be benched, which happened to me a lot last year. I like those middling QBs who just keep putting up stats because they start every week and they're healthy. All right, let's take a look at our final tier for our top 24 quarterbacks. Falling in this tier, and I was more shocked than anybody for number 24 himself, but Jameis Winston and Tom Brady tied, followed by Jared Goff at 23, and Sam Darnold, 24, bottom of the QB2s. That's crazy talk to me. Why is Sam Darnold this high, Eric? Oh, you're the wrong
Yeah, I
person
was
to
going to say,
talk
great
to.
question. I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
Don't get me going on
Anybody,
Darnold.
Rob?
He's got the tools, but I'm not buying him. I think he hasn't gotten a fair shake. I think people want Darnold to be what Ryan Tannehill became, getting out of the gross Adam Gase offense and going out and proving it and showing that he can do it. But he's not Ryan Tannehill to me. He doesn't have the same skill set. I don't.
Oh, I think he could be better than Tannehill, but
I think
it's almost too late at this point.
I think this is kind of like the Allen thing again, where it's like Tannehill had the late career resurgence in a new location, but it's like that's so rare.
Yep.
And it's so easy to look at Tannehill and go, oh, look at what could happen here, but it's so unlikely that it happens.
And I think we naturally
couldn't agree more.
With the unknown, you like start thinking like, oh, well, what if he sat behind Ben for a year and then was the Steelers, or like, oh, well, like you just start to project the good the potential, but not what's most likely when you start thinking about it. At least me personally, right? It's probably, I mean, I'm 26, but it's probably still higher than some guys who are short to start again, which he's not.
Where does Darnold play next year, Rob?
Wherever he goes, I think he's a backup.
That's not the question. Where does he play next year?
If I were Chicago, I would have taken a shot at him before making their quarterback moves. I don't know if he goes to Chicago at this point to play with. I would rather have him over Andy Dalton any day of the week. Looking at the draft, maybe someone like Carolina to take a shot. One of these quarterback needy teams that doesn't have the draft capital to move up or not the ability. But I don't know if he can beat Teddy Bridgewater out in camp either.
I think the Washington football team.
I don't know either.
That's where he is. He learns behind Fitzpatrick and then they give him a shot. That's my guess.
Please no.
I say something finally happens with Deshaun Watson and he ends up in Houston.
Ooh.
I'm saying Denver.
Mm,
They still need a quarterback in Denver.
that's a good one.
Yeah, Houston has Tyrod Taylor now, so I mean Denver's quarterback needy.
And at least he would have weapons. I just want to see him get one shot with some decent weapons. I'll be proud of him wherever he ends up. Jared Goff at 23, I think is ridiculously high for him. I don't know where I have him.
Especially after...
God damn. I have him at 23.
Yeah, his weapons got significantly worse, and then he lost Kenny Galladay. Yeah, no.
This is a guy I would actually take a few spots ahead of some of the other guys. I can...
More specific, who would you take him ahead of?
Oh, man. I think I have him probably neck and neck with Baker. I might take him in front of Daniel Jones or Derek Carr. For me, the Lions have the worst defense in the NFL. They were last in points and yards per game last year. I think Jared Goff is a guy who's about to get Blake Bortles garbage time points for the next 2 years. They restructured Goff's contract in the offseason. I think he's got a 2-year commitment. The way the cap hits work out, I think you're getting at least 2 of your 3-year windows that you want as a starter. And, I'll take it with a garbage defense. I think he's someone where you look at the box score through quarters 1 through 3 and you're like, geez, this guy is horrible. And he gets you those 2 touchdowns late in the game when they're running a 2-minute offense. The defense has pulled some starters and you like the fantasy points per game he puts up.
Quintez Cephas to the moon.
Oh, TJ Hawkinson to the moon. Well, he might already be there.
It's already there.
Yeah.
The wide receivers terrify me, but I still think Jared Goff is not as bad of a quarterback as he gets.
And I think they take a wide receiver this year. They're not going into the season with their wide receiver core as it is. Whether they take Jamar Chase or whoever else they take first, second round, this wide receiver class is deep. Even if they take a third round receiver, it's better than whatever they have on the roster.
True.
How dare you? Tyrell Williams and I are very upset with that take.
I do have a crush on Tyrell Williams, but he's not better than a third rounder at this point.
Might be a good late best ball pick at best.
He's a great best ball pick, but he's never going to stay healthy for a season.
All right, looking at the best of the rest, Jimmy G didn't make the list. Ben, Drew Lock, Cam Newton, Taysom Hill, Gardner Minshew, Andy Dalton. Anybody you guys want to mention that should have been in this top 24?
Taylor Heineke.
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry, there was a connection issue. Anybody you guys want to talk about who should have been in the top 24?
Speaking of the Washington football team, if I got to fill a roster spot, give me Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Just picked him up in an auction. I'm with you on that one. No, nobody we missed.
I would take Cam Newton on a 1-year rental.
Similarly, I'd take...
But not necessarily rank him.
Yes.
No, I wouldn't necessarily rank him very high.
Similarly, I'd take Ben. I mean, depending on my team, my QB3, I'd probably take Ben over Donald in the startup if unless I'm absolutely saying, oh no, I'm just completely punting on year one and going for the retool strategy. The guy who's going to be top 15, and you can start him for this year at least.
Between those three, if you had to pick one, would you take Fitz, Cam, or Big Ben?
For me, it's Cam. I will buy into the COVID narrative and not having a full off season with Bill Belichick. He's got the most rushing upside out of any of those guys. I will take his 150 yards per game passing to get 2 rushing touchdowns a game to see him be the goal line back down there.
Yeah, especially if you play in a league that doesn't have 6-point passing touchdowns. Those rushing touchdowns are huge.
All right, well, it's time for tags, where we share our final thoughts and let the riders know where they can find us. Eric, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Eric Braun. Draft is creeping up on us here, guys. It's a month away. Hit me up with some draft talk or trade talk, whatever.
Kyle.
Well, if you're looking for me on Twitter, you can find me at @KAllen_4. As always, if you're trying to find any of us, you can tweet us at Ride or Dynasty. We're happy to talk trades, draft, you name it. We're ready to talk to you.
Thanks, Kyle. Go ahead, Rob.
You can find me on Twitter and Reddit at the RoDoRob. I've got a much more reliable internet connection than Kyle. If you want to talk about Terrace Marshall, please slide into my DMs.
Kit.
You can find me on Twitter at Kit V Dynasty FF, on Reddit KitKit123. Doing some research now for a fun article about how bad defenses affect their own QB's fantasy production. So excited to get that finished, and hope you guys give it a browse.
The Jared Goff effect, as Rob would call it. I'm at JJ Wenner. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your listens every week. We're almost at the end of all of this, guys. Keep wearing your masks. Be safe. Be smart. And from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and remember, never say anything to make a meeting longer or cut a happy hour short. Boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.